So you may be wondering, how does GDPR affect your marketing strategy? Welcome to the Marketing Strategies channel. My name is Rosh, and in this video, we're talking about GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. Does it affect you? Well, it's designed to protect citizens of the EU, the European Union. Now, there's good news and bad news as it relates to your company and the GDPR. The GDPR is designed to focus on larger companies, companies with over 250 employees, companies that process a lot of data. Now, your company may have less than 250 employees, but that doesn't mean you can ignore these new regulations. However, if you follow some of these basic ideas, you should be okay when it comes to complying with the GDPR in the United States or wherever you find yourself outside of the European Union. The fact is, the GDPR does not just affect companies within the EU, it affects all companies around the world if they do business in the EU. Now, here's some good news. If an EU resident comes to your website and fills out a form or signs up for your newsletter, you don't have to worry about the EU regulations. However, if you target residents within the EU, you might have to consider how you're handling your data. For example, if you create a landing page targeting countries within the EU, for example, Germany, and you create a landing page using their native language and talking about the country and how it will benefit people within that country, you probably don't have much of a leg to stand on. In that situation, I would definitely follow the regulations laid out in the GDPR. Now, this is interesting. Say you go to a conference or network in a country in the EU, and somebody hands you their business card. You are not allowed to use the data on that card without their permission. In other words, you can't just add somebody to your email list without them knowing. So what kind of data needs to be protected? Honestly, all data, names, emails, phone numbers, even the IP addresses from where people visited your website. Now, larger companies with over 250 employees have to provide a data protection officer focused on protecting the data of its customers. Now, a lot of people assume that most data breaches come from the outside in, but believe it or not, a lot of data breaches come from the inside out. So it's important to have processes and procedures on how you handle customer data within your company. The GDPR is a warning shot for all of us to take a look at how we're handling data. The fact is, these rules and regulations will continue to spread around the world as more and more people demand privacy of their data, security of their data. People are getting tired of these hacks. People are getting tired of data breaches, and you don't want to get mixed up in the middle of a big-time lawsuit. Now, here's a snippet worth noting. EU residents are protected when they're in the European Union. However, if they travel outside, such as to the United States or Canada or Mexico or anywhere else around the world, they are not protected by those regulations. A few things you can do to comply with most of the regulations that could get you in trouble with the GDPR are to make sure that your terms of service are clear and simple, not a big long page full of legalese. Simply, how are you going to use the data? And you can't have a pre-populated checkbox. The customer must check the box allowing you to use the data. The core principles behind the GDPR are transparency with the data and, of course, protection of that data. But if you let people know what you're going to do with the data, how long you're going to keep it, and that they have the right to opt out at any point in time and make all that extremely easy, chances are you'll have few problems with the GDPR regulations. And if you have a data breach, especially one that affects European Union residents, you have 72 hours to contact authorities. No matter what the size of your company, it's probably a good idea to do that anyway. So should you be concerned about the GDPR? Well, if you are transparent with your customers' data, and you're not tricking them to get that data, and you allow customers to have copies of that data or to delete their data from your system easily, then you should have no problem at all. However, if you're a company of over 250 employees, I would certainly seek counsel on the new GDPR, especially if you're doing business directly in the European Union. You might also want to consider for the worst case scenario. And if somebody asks for their data, what is the process that you go through to get that to them as quickly as possible? And if there is a data breach, what is your process to get the information to the authorities within 72 hours? It's also important to make sure that your third-party services are compliant. Email and credit card processing, any company that handles data on your behalf. You want to make sure they're compliant with the GDPR so it doesn't blow back on you. Another interesting tidbit worth noting is that charities are not exempt from this. Everyone who handles data needs to make sure they are transparent in handling data properly. My recommendation to you is if you have old data and it's not valuable to you anymore, and especially if it's not encrypted, destroy it, delete it. And remember, a laptop with a password is not secured data. So there is a lot to this topic, and much of it depends on the size of your company. Do you have more or less than 250 employees? How are you dealing with the GDPR? I look forward to reading your answers in the comments below. And of course, if you found this video valuable, make sure you like it, give it a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. And if you don't want to miss a future upload, be sure to subscribe.